everybody, it's Romania Black, and it's the Rule of 8! It's my lucky number! It's episode 8 of Apothecary Diaries season 2, and 8 is my lucky number, and also, I treat whenever they tell me that a season is going to be 2 consecutive cours of 24 episodes. To me, that means we split the 24 episode season in half, and you have a season of 12, and not a season, but you have a set of 12 and a set of 12 episodes that create the whole core of 24 episodes. And with that being said, I feel that in that case, we can treat the 8th episode of each half like the Rule of 8, which if you know me from last season, you have the Rule of 8. Usually the 8th episode is really good in a series that is 12 to 14 episodes. But that's today. So I'm super excited. But also we have a lot of comments, extra information from the novels and from the manga to be talked about, and we're going to dive right into that. So this may be a long introduction, but there are lots of things to talk about. I woke up this morning and I was like, I've been traveling the last several days with the team that I coach, and I got back last night at like midnight, and it's now 9 a.m. and I was like, okay, I've had breakfast, gotten up, I'm ready to go. I want to watch Apothecary Diaries because I have been itching to get to this episode ever since it came out, and I couldn't watch it because I was gone. So anyway, let's dive right in, shall we? El Freya for episode 6 says, in relation to MaoMao not being able to practice medicine and a specific moment from season 1 in the actual English dub for episode 13, around the 6-minute mark, it goes, MaoMao saying, I definitely need to bring mortar and pestle, and I'll have to have my notebook. I can't bring less underwear. And Loman says, just so you know, you probably aren't allowed to take any of those with you. Positions are allowed certain supplies, and you aren't one. If you're seen with those tools, it'll appear as if you're making poison. Well, thank you, English dub. Giving us that. I feel like there's a lot of lost in translation when translations happen, and translation fascinates me because it's an art form, but I feel like there are times where certain translations make things more apparent, and then if you're not familiar with the native language, there's something lost there. Point taken. English dub, good job getting on it. I'm glad you included that, like I've been talking about the last couple episodes. Ichu says, for episode 7, I must say it's a clever way to put maternal lineage into a paternal system using color blindness as a test. Because the color blindness gene is X recessive, so a male baby born to a colorblind mother must also be colorblind, but it will be lost the next generation unless the child is also from a woman who carries the recessive gene, because the father only provides the Y chromosome to the male babies and also passes the shrine of choosing. Yeah, that's really cool to try to like implement that into the system, being like there has to be that maternal trait even though it's like a patriarchal structure. I really like that. I think that's cool. And then Ika comments saying that according to Wikipedia, now you take Wikipedia as an English teacher, you can take Wikipedia sometimes for a grain of salt, but according to that, 0.5% of women are colorblind, but 8% of men are colorblind, which is wild. So women carry the trait, but then it shows up more prominently in men, which is so crazy. Cool. I think that's super, super interesting. And then H-Banana7 added on to that with episode 7, saying it's probably a coincidence, but MaoMao's garbs that she wears a lot are red and green, which are colorblind colors. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I love that. So Read the Best has a lot of information with episode 6 that are tied to the novel and the manga. So I'm going to read a lot of this verbatim because they point out a lot of differences in episode 6, saying there were 2 short conversations cut out of the anime. I thought one of them was really funny. It takes place when Yinghua and MaoMao are walking into the clinic. In the first one, MaoMao reveals that after she bumped into Jinshi the night before, she got a lantern out of storage to use as a light to attract bugs to use as bait for something she was looking for. Yinghua is worried that whatever MaoMao was trying to attract with the bugs was somehow worse than the bugs. And then we find out later it's the lizard tail, and we've talked about that in previous episodes. Then the second conversation is the funny one. Yinghua says MaoMao's room is full of stuff and smells like medicine. Hongyang doesn't like it and will either make MaoMao clean it or force MaoMao to move it to the shed. MaoMao thought the shed was a great idea, and she was going to ask Hongyang if she could move out to the shed. The shed is bigger than her room and away from the sleeping quarters, so no one would complain if she was loud at night. And if she had her own building, she might be able to do stuff with fire without getting into trouble. Yinghua spends the rest of the walk trying to talk her out of it, and MaoMao's ignoring her. I find this a nice bit of foreshadowing. Also, I find it interesting that MaoMao likes the idea of moving into the shed, but chastises the lady-in-waiting for forcing a sick servant to the shed. It shows MaoMao doesn't really have a problem with the shed in general, but for her, it's more about the circumstances. Yeah, and back in season 1, she was trying to convince Jinshi to let her go. Girl wants to live in a manger like baby Jesus. That's just what she wants to do. But honestly, with MaoMao, I think that's kind of cool because of a couple things. One, it shows that MaoMao doesn't really care about classism. She doesn't care about being elitist or having like the finer things in life. She just wants a place where she can study her medicine. So the shed is apt for that. And also she likes the idea of she doesn't want to burden people with her experiments and with the possibility of things going wrong. So she wants to be by herself to experiment on there. Look, Jinshi, you just need to go get her a shed. Just get the girl a shed. You know, in Beauty and the Beast, bitches love libraries. MaoMao loves a shed. Just get her an experimental shed to do her medicines. That's all she needs. Xinlu, which was the woman in the clinic, her name means deep green. MaoMao states that for her to have been around as long as she has, she has to be smart or there has to be some special reason that the old woman was allowed to stay. MaoMao didn't like the idea of receiving special treatment from the woman because she was Lady Gyokyo's lady-in-waiting. She didn't like how the doings of the consorts were ignored by everyone else. The timeline's a bit different in the anime than the book. In the anime, they say it's been half a month since the maid with the cough has been seen. In the novel, it's only been 5 days, which is a little bit of a significant difference. I feel like the anime kind of amps it up a little bit more. The reason why MaoMao's face was hidden for some parts of the episode when she first entered the Crystal Pavilion was because the scene is told completely in Shin's point of view. I just liked it because it was kind of like building up to the mystery, but okay. She describes MaoMao's disguise as slim and nearly emaciated. During this walk, we discover that Shin and Lihua are the same age. Shin's mother is Lihua's father's older sister. That seems rather significant because it's like the dad and kind of the hierarchy, and then there's Lihua, whereas Shin is the mother's child, you know. All the ladies in waiting at the Crystal Pavilion are from noble families. Lihua does not have morning sickness, but instead has a hearty appetite. When they inquire about the shed, Shin has an internal monologue where she's thinking about how, when it was assumed this would be the birthplace of the next emperor, there was a lot of expansion going on. There are now freestanding bathrooms in various outbuildings, and that weird freckled girl had a sauna built that Lihua uses, but Shin doesn't approve of it. Shin can't remember if the shrubs had always been there or not, and she recognizes MaoMao as the weird freckled girl, who did a number of outrageous things that made half the women of the Crystal Pavilion too scared to defy her. When the quack ran to the shed, Shin pushed MaoMao aside so hard that MaoMao fell onto her butt. Interesting! So then when MaoMao is cleaning up, she's all, no one in the Crystal Pavilion would hardly notice her. And Rhett the Best is like, girl, Nile is not just a river in Egypt. She also spends time changing and complaining about wanting a bath to wash the perfumed oil out of her hair. She borrows a Crystal Pavilion lady-in-waiting's dress that MaoMao chides for lacking practicality. There's also a bit about sometimes servants or maids catch the emperor's eye and become mothers of the nation, which is probably part of the reason why the Crystal Pavilion is filled with women with more beauty than brains. Okay. MaoMao, although I do think the emperor likes a woman that is intelligent in this case. I think the current emperor, he has 2 things he likes. He likes an intelligent lady, and they gotta have big boobs. That's his jam, right? MaoMao states that even though there's only one quack doctor, he has so much time on his hands, the medical office is practically a cafe of the eunuchs. Which I think is my favorite line in this section. I agree. A cafe of the eunuchs. I want to see that. I want to see more eunuchs visiting the quack doctor. Can we see that? Can we see the cafe of the eunuchs? I want that. That was one of my favorite parts of Sun Yao-Ting's book, was talking about the camaraderie between all the eunuchs and how they all banded together. So I want to see more of that. Also, I think that's a good sign if the quack doctor is not busy. Look, doctors' offices are great. They are there for a reason, but a not busy doctor's office, I would consider a plus. The confrontation scene went basically the same in the novel, but some of the choreography seems to indicate that at one point, Lihua, Jinshi, and Gaoshun were defending MaoMao. First, after the scratching, Lihua moved to MaoMao rather than to Shin. Then, when Xin went to do the toss of the oils, Gao Shun and Jinshi stepped in between MaoMao and Li Hua. So even though they were protecting Li Hua, they were also protecting MaoMao. It also states that Xin is so high-ranking on her own that if she wanted to, she could shut down the investigation and get away free. I suspect that's part of the reason that Li Hua banished her from the rear palace, which was something everyone was shocked she did. Her pregnancy was also something that Jinshi seemed shocked to find out about. Yeah, he seemed shocked in the episode to find out about it too, which she's not really made any indication. And Jinshi's been so concerned about Gyokyo, he probably has not been even paying attention to Li Hua like he probably should be. A couple of notes about the bush. From Xin's perspective, it had yellow flowers. From MaoMao's, white. I could see that. Sometimes white and yellow get a little confused. I wonder if there's a colorblind aspect to that. I don't know if that was a translation or what. The black fruit holds seeds that can be ground into a white face whitening powder. Ah, MaoMao doesn't state that it can be used for abortions. Maybe that's something that's stated later or by, we're going to talk about this in a hot second, that's stated later or by the face whitening powder she meant had been the toxic kind. The bushes seem less ominous in the book. MaoMao could tell they'd been freshly planted because of the color of the soil, and the green and white are supposed to aid with health. MaoMao assumed whoever planted them was trying to take care of the woman in the shed. And we think it was the girl in the end that did the planting. We talked about that last week. Here's the thing. Rhett says Jinshi doesn't give MaoMao a handkerchief in the novel. It just doesn't happen. Then they say it might happen at some point other than the novel, and they moved it here, but I don't know. Hey, y'all. Before you comment with stuff like this and say, I mean, it could happen, but I don't know. Maybe look it up. I'm all about not being spoiled. And this is one of those moments where I told the moderators, I was like, I know it's not technically a spoiler, but like, if you're going to comment, take the time to look it up. Don't sit there and be like, I mean, I don't know if it happens or not. It could be a spoiler, but I'm just going to put it anyway. Just look it up, y'all. You got the time. If you got the time to write this big ass comment, you got the time to go look it up. Double check. I'm an English teacher, y'all. Don't just be like, well, I could have looked it up, teach, but I decided just to put it down there and see what happens. Take the time to look it up, or don't put it in the comment. Just, please. Anyway, and that kind of ties into my other comment, was that somebody said on Patreon, the current Empress Dowager, Jinshi's mother or grandmother, knew very well what her husband was capable of and what is preferred. She didn't want to let that asshole touch Jinshi. I was getting onto people in the Discord, and I'll get onto it here, y'all. And I told the moderators, I'm like, I want it cracked down. I want the show to tell me these things, not you in the comments. And I know that sounds mean, but I love this show and the mystery that it gives. I love theorizing about things. And Anime Annie points out in their comment for episode 7, I love that line, when nobody with firsthand knowledge remains, the story becomes the truth. I think it ties nicely with Loman's teachings to MaoMao about not making conjectures. I know that I theorize about Lolan and Shisui, and that's like just my theory, but I say in every discussion, we don't know what will happen. This is just my theory. I'm going at it from an anime-only blind perspective. I don't want people to tell me this stuff because, like, I didn't know if the Emperor was an asshole. I knew he preferred younger girls, which would insinuate there's a disgusting aspect about him, but I want the show to tell me. And I'm telling you right now, if I get later on in an episode and we get this backstory on him, I'm going to be like, well, you already revealed that he's an asshole, so who cares? Don't reveal stuff to me in the comments until the show does. Please and thank you. And I'm going to ask the mods to be super strict from now on because it pisses me off. As a content creator, I want to read your comments. I want to respond, but y'all keep doing this. And it gets very frustrating. So please stop. If you can't comment without spoiling or revealing something that will get commented on later, then maybe just say great reaction and move on. Cool? Cool. Anyway, Anime Annie says, I think that, what do they say there? In this case, just because someone says the story of the royal mother is true, it would be a conjecture to automatically assume it is and discount any other possibilities. Exactly. Though, with the consort Ado no longer in the Imperial Palace, the line can also relate to the possibility of Jinshi's parentage being not what is accepted as truth, i.e., that he's actually Emperor's son and not his brother. Yeah, that's a really good tie-in. So even if MaoMao doesn't wish to acknowledge him as her dad, which, fair play to her, Loman has been a good father to her, Locken's blood runs through her veins, and she has more protection within the palace as Locken's daughter than when she was a mere servant girl who'd been kidnapped and sold off. Yeah, and we talked about that with episode 7. So, yeah, anyway, just, y'all, do your research. If you're going to comment about it, don't be like, I think this happens. Don't comment unless you know, right? And please let me find out through the show. That's why I'm watching this show, to be surprised. If y'all are going to spoil it for me and tell me all the things, what is the point of me watching? You know? So anyway, I want to get off on a good foot. So we're going to ignore all that and just keep that in mind. I told the moderators, I'm going to be extra strict from now on because I have to be. Because people just don't listen. So anyway, we're going to get started. And I'm sorry for taking 15 minutes. But I'm so excited. It's episode 8. It's the rule of 8. I can't wait to get started on this episode. So let's get into it. We are going to start episode 8 of season 2 of the Apothecary Diaries. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, this was a bit of a setup episode. But then this entire season has been doing a lot of setting up of things that are going to come back later on and be done with that. But yeah, how interesting. Definitely a good rule of 8. I mean, I wanted to know more about the Empress Dowager and her personality, and we get a little bit of that in this episode, so that was fun. She seems okay with MaoMao, which is good. I was afraid from last episode. I was like, I didn't know, given how she was. I mean, I didn't know how she would be portrayed and what her views of MaoMao would be. She seems okay. She seems like she really trusts her son, which is the current emperor. So I think that him approving of MaoMao gives her a sense that she could approve of her, but she's testing her. Also, girl, MaoMao, if you do not think at this point that you are not more than just a regular servant girl, you are in complete denial, because you have the Empress Dowager and the Emperor literally asking you to do them favors. They're not going out asking Xiaolon to do that. No. I'm like, girl, you are getting it in with this family, whether you think you are or not. And I think they know that because they know that Jinshi is not a eunuch. So I want to talk about it with y'all. I like the way that she kind of I like the way this series starts out with things portrayed as very ominous, like her walking up to the door and looking in. Honestly, her hair and eye color, now that we see her up close, is the same as Jinshi's, but he could be her grandson and that still be the case. But his eye shape and the way of his face definitely features more Aduo. So I still think he's Aduo's kid, personally. But I think he's Aduo's child, but I don't know if the Empress Dowager knows. Here's my thing. I feel like the Empress Dowager might know that he's not her son, but she doesn't want to say anything because it's better to just let him be her son and be the brother to the current emperor than to start a whole drama with her being the emperor's actual son and heir to the throne. I think that she is fully okay with letting Jinshi, and here's my thing too, she became the empress at a very young age and doesn't seem like she's had a lot of freedom for herself, just based on the circumstance. So if she was, she has a son that's the emperor that could change things and undo a lot that her mother-in-law and husband did. So I think there's a chance she's totally fine with letting the emperor have his spot and not revealing that Jinshi's not her son, but her grandson, because she doesn't want Jinshi to not have, she wants Jinshi to have the freedom she couldn't have, is what I'm trying to say, is what I think is the case. But, we need an heir. The emperor has to have a son. So Lihua and Gyokyo, hope one of your kids is a boy so we can just have this whole thing solved and your kid doesn't get poisoned and they're able to grow up. That would end the whole story. But I don't think it's going to be that easy, right? So, okay. Here's the thing, y'all. All I'm going to say about the OG Emperor and the Shed is I would have found out this episode. But, patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue. And I don't think I'd be as frustrated about it in this episode as in another channel on another series I was watching. This exact same thing happened where people were trying to tell me ahead of time about plot information that 2 episodes later I was gonna find out. So y'all just check yourselves. I'm not gonna talk about the shed scene. I was so mad about the shed scene and the fact that I was like, oh, I was gonna find out this episode. But and the novel stuff could have waited until this episode to tell me, but I'm just not gonna talk about it because it makes me mad. So I am glad that MaoMao, of course, I like that MaoMao considers something that Hong Niang was gonna punish her for. She was like, oh no, this is great. Never mind. Yes. Oh no, I'm in this giant shed where I can do experiments and hang up all my medicines. Oh no, Hong Niang, this is such a terrible punishment. I'm glad that she was like, okay. And Hong Niang's like, now think about what you did, scaring everybody with the lizards. And MaoMao's like, okay, sure, we'll think about that. Sure thing. In the storage shed. And she's like, yeah, all the stuff that she says in this is what Rhett told me in that comment. So I kind of wish I hadn't known. I don't know if I want to check comments about the differences between the novel and the manga now. If it's going to reveal stuff that I'm going to find out in the show. Because now I have nothing to talk about with it. Because I'm like, well, we've already discussed it. So, frustrating, y'all. Very frustrating. So, yeah, I do like that it literally has everything she would need. It has the ways for her to make medicine. It has the ways for her to store things. It's literally a paradise for her. Which is curious. For someone that has been told not to make medicines and not to dabble in it, you're literally enabling her. You are putting her in an enabling situation where she has all this stuff in front of her. And so I don't know if that's a test. If that's a test to be like, here's all your temptations, don't do it. Or if they are in the process of trying to get it to where she can make those medicines and she's here if she needs to be. Or if it's going to be a scenario where she's in this shed with all of the equipment that she would need and she's not going to use it necessarily until something comes up, like an emergency situation in the season where they're suddenly like, we need medicine made. And MaoMao's like, I have a shed with all the things. And then she goes and makes the medicine and it just works out in that moment when it's needed to be. So I think it's smart on the writer's part to have her in this shed because you can do a lot of things with it. You can make it a temptation, you can make it a test, but you can also conveniently have it there if we need it. And then the plot will be like, oh, well, it was there all along. So yeah, I think that's a good writing strategy to have it like that. And then Hong Niang's like, oh my God, what are we going to do with this? She's like, think about what you've done. And then MaoMao's, of course, like, look at all this. She's like, this is where I'll hang the herbs. This is where I'll make the medicine. This is where this goes and that goes. So she's going to just transform. So it looks like what it was before. My dog's being silly. What it was before, she's going to transfer and recreate it here in this shed. Okay, so what it was before, we saw what her previous place looked like. And now MaoMao's just going to change the shed into exactly that again. And Hong Niang's like, oh my God, what have I done? So yeah, I like the other ladies in waiting are like, oh, are you sure you want to stay in the shed? And MaoMao's like, well, this is kind of better than what I had. MaoMao asked Hong Niang herself to go in the shed. Okay, so she wanted to be there. And they say, tell her to stop collecting insects. And she's like, but I'm not. I'm collecting lizard tails. And they say, well, they're like, there's a rumor going around. There's a weird court lady catching bugs while laughing to herself. The thing about it is, that's not MaoMao. That is Shisu. So we need to establish a couple things. Because my theorizing with Shisu, I'm like, okay. So with Shisu is the one collecting bugs. For whatever reason, she is collecting bugs, but she is getting somehow confused by some of the other people as MaoMao, who is collecting the lizard tails. The one thing I don't know about, and I swear if you all spoil it, I will be pissed, but, so don't. I will say the one thing that I don't understand what Shisu is doing is why she's collecting the bugs. I don't know what the point of that is. So I don't know. I don't know what the point of her collecting the bugs are. If she's making a medicine with them, if she's using them to lure out, because MaoMao was collecting insects to lure the lizards out so she could collect the lizard tails. That was her whole point, according to the notes from the novel. And so I don't know if Shisui is collecting the bugs for the same reason or a different reason. Are there bugs that can cause abortions? Are there bugs that can be used in abortion medicine? I don't know. I don't know. I'm torn on whether to trust Shisui or not. Because I feel like this show is doing one of two things. Either it is setting up that Shisui is the most innocent, wholesome being, and she's been just a court lady this entire time that is totally fine, and we're being led to believe that she's like Lolan. Or she is, Huckleberry, be nice. Or she is Lolan, and there's one of two scenarios where Lolan is actually a nice person or Lolan's manipulative. And it's one of these three scenarios, and I can't decide which one it is. So I feel like we need more evidence before we can narrow that down. And she's like, that one time I was just collecting moths because that's what I needed for the lantern. And that's when she thinks of Shisui. So she's like, this is a serious issue. I need to stop this rumor before it gets out too far. She's like, I need to go find Shisui and figure out what the deal is. Now, this part is, you can't deny that this part is so suspicious. So suspicious. Like, it is on the nose suspicious to the point where I don't know if the show is intentionally trying to lead me astray or if it's like, you know, if it's giving away the ghost. Literally, because Xiaolan says that Shisui is like a phantom. She's like a phantom. You know, sometimes you see her, sometimes you don't. And I'm like, what do you mean? She says she can be a real phantom. And then the other lady, she like goes to ask them where Shisui is. And they're like, oh, well, we might have seen her, we might not have. She is rarely tracked. People don't know where she is all the time. She's like, oh, sometimes she's here, sometimes she's not here. That, to me, is like a nail in the coffin on the Shisui is Lolan theory. Because if Lolan was going back and forth between the palace, the pavilion that she's staying at, and here with the other ladies, that would make total sense. It's like they don't see her all the time. They don't keep track of her because she's going back and forth as Lolan and as Shisui. She just shows up to save face and be like, yeah, Shisui's still here. But then she goes back and is Lolan. Nobody's keeping track of where she actually is. Nobody's staying with her. And that is suspicious to me because these girls see each other all the time for their tasks. But if nobody's staying with Shisui or knows where she is, that's a huge red flag that she's Lolan to me. That's a huge red flag that she is. But then again, we don't have the full evidence, so it's just conjecture. And maybe Shisui is just an eccentric girl. Maybe she stays in the northern area in a shed. Maybe she's like MaoMao and she's doing other things. Maybe she's making drugs. We don't know. That's the thing too. Like, is she like MaoMao and making drugs? Is she helping Lolan? Is she a separate person than Lolan? They're giving us all of these flags, but there's no way to really determine like what's going on. And the other thing is, because of what MaoMao says here, we don't know for sure if they're telling us everything about Shisui, because they know MaoMao is connected to Gyokyo, and they may not want to tell her everything because they don't want to get Shisui in trouble. So there's all of these factors that we can't quite determine yet what about Shisui is true or what's being left out or whatever. But Xiaolan, it is noted, is somebody that is very talkative, and she is a social butterfly and good at getting information. Now, when MaoMao offers the handkerchief, based on what Rhett had said in their comments, it would make sense for MaoMao from a narrative standpoint and the show standpoint. Because at first I was like, MaoMao, why are you giving away Jinshi's handkerchief? Like, this is a gift he's given to you. It's very sincere. But if in the novel there was actually no handkerchief, then this is a very convenient way for the plot to just be like, let's get rid of the handkerchief, and now it's not part of the series anymore, and we're going to tie up that loose end and move on, right? Which is fine, but it's like, if Jinshi had actually given her that handkerchief in the novel, I feel like it would have been kind of, I don't know. It would feel out of character in the series for her to just give it away on a whim, because it'd be like just her giving away her hairpin on a whim. But since it's just anime only, I guess it makes sense for that to be the case. So anyway, is she collecting cicadas? Is that what those are? I thought they were crickets at first, but now seeing it on the tree, it looks like it might be a cicada. Okay, we'll talk about this in a hot second. So she sees the white blossoms. And says, when I was little, I used to collect white blossom seeds with the courtesans, and they weren't used for powder and makeup. They were used for abortion drugs. So in the northeast region, in the north region of the pavilion, where Shisu is a lot, by the way, she's collecting maybe cicadas. And also there just happens to be white blossoms, which can be used for abortion drugs. There's a part of me that doesn't want to believe that Shisu is cruel or mean, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to believe that Shisu is doing anything negative or harmful. But then there's another side of me that's like, ooh, all of these things are adding up against her. But you could say, like, what if Shisu is going to be a scapegoat? What if somebody is using Shisu and then they're going to throw her to the wolves and say that it's her fault and MaoMao is going to have to defend her and save her? I don't know. Because it just, like, Shisui's always in this area where the white blossoms are, and MaoMao's like, those are used to make the abortion drug. And she's always there. She's near this information that could be potentially hazardous. She's not seen a lot. They don't track her. We don't know where she is all the time. So we don't know if she's a separate person than Lowland. Is she keeping in contact with Lowland? Is she Lowland herself? And if she is Lowland, is she taking those white blossoms and that other information and maybe not making abortion drugs, but passing on the information to other people like Sheen from the last few episodes? Or is this all Suirei's doing, and Suirei is going to scapegoat Shisu? That's a possibility as well. If Suirei is off here being Moriarty and being super suspicious, is it possible that she could scapegoat Shisu and be the actual culprit? And is Shisu kind of like a lock-in situation where Shisui's trying to uncover everything too and get one step ahead of Suirei? Could Shisu be the Watson to MaoMao's more Sherlock? I don't know. Again, we don't know enough information to make any big determinations. What we do find out is that Sheen was trying to mask the fact that she was messing with the oils that could be used as an abortion drug, and that's the first time she used the perfume, and that's what gave her away. That's what ended up hurting her. But she was wanting to take the place of Li Hua. And so MaoMao, this part was a little bit weird to me because MaoMao was in the room when Li Hua was like pointed to her stomach and Jinxi and Gaoxin were like, you could be pregnant. And I'm like, MaoMao, did she let that go in one ear and out the other? Or did she not notice in that moment? I felt like she should know this already, that it's possible Li Hua is pregnant as well. Or maybe she's just in denial of it until she gets more information. But that's not the only mystery I noted from the incident. The abortion drug made by courtesans, in addition to using white blossom, uses lantern plants, peony, balsam, and mercury. Well, the problem with the balsam, as we found out, is that's one thing I am afraid of if they try to pin anything on MaoMao. MaoMao's been using the balsam for like the nails. So if somebody tries to pin this on MaoMao as creating the poison, they would have the balsam as evidence of that, and she can't really deny it because she has been doing the nail thing when she was trying to get back at Locken. So the peony and the mercury, though, and the lantern plant, those I don't think MaoMao has any connection to. And the mercury, I mean, that's pretty much classified. You can't just get a hold of that, right? Aside from mercury, the other ingredients can be found in the rear palace. Yeah, even though she could have gotten them here, there was also the caravan. Interesting. So basically, MaoMao points out that most of the medicine ingredients you can use to create the abortion drug are in the rear palace. But there also were in the caravan. So then there's the question of who had the knowledge of it there in the palace and who possibly was learning about it from the caravan, maybe from the envoy or whatnot. So I don't know. Interesting. She had no knowledge of the medicine, but someone taught her how to make the poison. And that someone is probably still here in the rear palace. Now, of course, as soon as she's saying they're somehow in the rear palace, look who shows up but Shisu. So, I mean, is it supposed to be like a clever foreshadowing of, I wonder who could be doing the poisons, and then Shisu shows up? Or is that the show trying to give us a red herring and making us think that it's Shisu when it could be Suirei or somebody else? I don't know. It's like, how clever is the show being, and how much is it trying to like get the masses to get on board with who it could possibly be? I don't know. And then there's Shisu looking after all the bugs. And MaoMao's just like, oh my god. And they're like, they confused me for her? Really? Now, the bugs that Shisu gets are not cicadas. They are crickets. So, I don't know. I kind of want to know, though. I don't think it's a spoiler to look up cricket medicinal purposes. Cricket medicinal purposes. Says crickets are a good source of protein. The benefits of them: they're rich in protein, etc., vitamins, minerals, and fibers. They have gut health benefits. Are there risks to eating crickets? Says, as mentioned, they've been safely used for foods for thousands of years and are commonly consumed. Cricket protein powder is safe and does not cause any adverse health effects in healthy people, but eating insects can come with safety concerns. For people who are allergic to them, scientists need to do more research into those allergic reactions. They can carry pathogens that could harm, they could infect animals and humans. There could be parasites that could potentially harm people. Eating insects has the potential to make you sick. Blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing like that would be tied to like an abortion drug or anything like that. So I don't know what she's planning on doing with the crickets. I don't know if she's just collecting a bunch of insects or what she's doing. I'm curious. And then she's like, why were you hunting these insects? And MaoMao's like, she must really love bugs. I don't know. She keeps having those little cages filled with bugs. So I don't know. Again, the show is trying to either be very deliberate in pointing out that she is Lowland, or it's adding these little quirks like her collecting bugs to kind of potentially throw us off of what's actually going on. And I don't know what to think about it. So she asked MaoMao to sit down, and Shisu looks so unsuspecting. She just looks so unsuspecting. She's so cheery, so chipper, and it's like, I don't know if I should, but her eye color and hair color is the same as Lowland's, and it's like, she's like, the insect is native to the island nation in the east, and they make these noises by rubbing their wings together, and it's probably part of some trade goods, but they escaped. So I think this is the only place you can find them, like the moths from the other day. So, I mean, it could be that Shisu just likes bugs, and she thinks they're interesting, and she's trying to collect them, and that's cool. Good for her to find them. And she's like, they have similar colors of cockroaches, but they're different. And MaoMao, I love her and MaoMao's friendship, that they're both like, I would honestly love it if she was Lowland, but instead of her being a villain in this series, that Lowland and MaoMao become like a force to be reckoned with. Like the two of them working together, like geeking out over bugs and fungi and plants while also solving the world's problems. I would be on board with that. I would love that immensely. Like, put these two powerhouse forces together. But then the Empress Dowager comes. Like, there's the note. That umbrella, y'all, the Phoenix fan, that umbrella is the most extravagant, over-the-top umbrella. I want it. I wanted to follow it I want it to follow me wherever I go. I love it. The fringe, everything. It is gorgeous. And she has her, like, the people symbolizing her coming there behind her, which is great. Love that. She's so pretty. The Empress Dowager, also super young. I don't think she can technically be 30. Don't think she can be that young. We're going to talk about that, the age thing. Because I'm like, Jinshi's 19. There is no way she's 30. No way she's 30. So we're gonna touch base on that here in a second. But they're like, is she the Empress Dowager? The last I saw her was at the garden party last year. Like, okay. She really does look young. Yeah. It's hard to believe she's the Emperor's mother. Well, anyway. And then she's like, I love Shisui's like, why are you hiding? And she's like, well, it's just kind of a reflex. And they're like, what is she doing going to the clinic? And so then here's my other thing. Shisui knows about the foundation of the clinic and knows about where it came from. And Shisui seems to really idolize. She seems like she idolizes the Dowager Empress. Which, if she was Lolan and she wants to become the Empress, I could kind of see that, because if she really idolizes the Empress Dowager and she wants to like become a model after her, then her marrying the Emperor would seem like a logical step to do that, to get closer to her. But if she's the one doing that, it's like she doesn't really do anything to get the Emperor closer to her. But then again, she's also maybe leading this double life and doing other things. So who knows? Again, it's like a lock-in situation. Shisui is giving me lock-in vibes at this point in the series, where I feel like she is being set up and we, the audience, are meant to know her as something. Maybe it's Lolan, maybe it's not. But I feel like if she is Lolan and we think that there's like a negative connotation to that, it might be the opposite, and she might turn out to be a lock-in character that's trying to help the kingdom rather than hurt it. But I don't know. So maybe she's trying to expose the envoy. Maybe she's trying to expose people trying to hurt the Emperor. We don't know for sure yet. But for a simple court lady hunting bugs, she knows an awful lot about the history of the Dowager Empress that I'm like, do you now? So we find out that the Empress Dowager, if we're going to put, I'm going to put ED here. Her name is Anshi. Which is funny, because at first I was like, oh, Jinshi Anshi. But then I'm like, Jinshi's not supposed to be known as the royal prince or the royal prince, essentially. He's supposed to be just a eunuch. So it's funny, his eunuch name, if that is, I'm assuming it's not his prince name because it's his eunuch name, is similar to Anshi's name. I was like, oh, okay. Has similar characteristics in it. So she founded the clinic. Okay. Honestly, if she founded the clinic for these women to work, I could see her being totally on board with people other than eunuchs working in the rear palace. I could see her being on board with it. But it's just a matter of making it official in a way that doesn't maybe seem too progressive or crazy, because then, you know, people might get all up in arms. You know how that goes. But Shisui says she's the one that founded it. Back when the Empress had a lot of power, the Dowager Empress couldn't make it official. Yeah, I feel like the Shishi-esque OG Empress and Anshi did not have, they weren't friends. There wasn't a lot there that was good. And so she says the Empress Dowager is really kind. And MaoMao just kind of looks at her as she says that. I'm like, how does Shisui know that the Dowager Empress is really kind, other than just, I mean, her making the clinic is a kind gesture, sure, but the way she says it and the fondness she has almost makes it seem like she kind of knows her more than that. And I'm like, well, how would you know her more than that? Oh, well, let's see. Lolan's dad was in pretty good with the royal family, so that could be a reason. My theory just gets more and more like, They say she was behind the banning of slaves and eunuchs. So it was her that banned slaves and eunuchs. All right. Okay. There we go. Also, you know what? What if Shisui was like a twin? What if Shisui was like Lolan's twin that ended up in the palace? What if they were, I mean, we've had this talk of sisters and cousins with the envoy. What if Shisui and Lolan are twins? Or sisters? Who knows? So many options. Now, I do think MaoMao's discussion here is really interesting, because she's like, from a humanitarian aspect, banning slaves was probably a good idea. But aside from slaves who are treated like animals, there are some, like courtesans, who use their body as collaterals to borrow money. It's legal and considered similar to be employment. But seen from the outside, they could be viewed as slaves as well. So MaoMao brings up this interesting point about sex workers. About AKA courtesans. And I thought this was really interesting, and it was definitely worth noting for the world that MaoMao is talking about. And then she says the old lady said when she saw the bands and they were announced, she felt a chill run down her spine. Well, let's talk about that. So, from The Last Eunuch, the book I read last season, Sun Yao Ting talked about how the way that the empire worked at the time in China was that if you didn't live in the rear palace or the royal palace and you weren't born wealthy, you struggled in poverty. You could barely eat, and people struggled to survive. And if you had any type of physical disability or any type of handicap, then you were as good as dead if you didn't find a way to make it into the rear palace. So for Sun Yao Ting, his family was so poor and starving to death, he's like, I have to make myself a eunuch to get a job in the palace so I can make money so my family can live. And that was literally the point of him doing that. If he hadn't become a eunuch in that book, his family would have starved to death, is what the illusion was. And so with the sex workers too, you can see why the brothel owner, she's like scared because she's like, hey, in this patriarchal society y'all have established, we don't have a lot of rights. And if we don't establish a way to assert some form of dominance, even though it's through this brothel and this prostitution, we're going to starve and die. So on the one hand, now in modern society, obviously slavery is no-go. Obviously the, prostitution, human trafficking is no-go. I mean, in modern society, these things still happen and they are terrible and they should not happen. But that is the case primarily not only because it's horrible, but because there are ways for women and other people to get employment and to get jobs and to have a sustainable life. During the time frame that we're talking about in the historical context of this series, these women that use their body as collateral found ways to make money and get themselves a better life, where the alternative would possibly be horribly worse. So even though in modern society and now we look at that and go, oh, we don't need that. Back then in that context, yeah, being a eunuch was kind of needed sometimes because otherwise you could starve to death because of the way that society was structured. Now, you can see that the Dowager Empress is trying, like with the foundation of the clinic, it seems like she has a little bit more progressive ideals and she's looking at it as, oh, we need to ban these things because they're bad. And that on the surface is really good. But MaoMao's pointing out from her perspective, coming from that environment, seeing how, yeah, it's a great idea to get rid of these things. But what about the people who rely upon them right now to survive? What safety net do you have in place for them if you take that away? And it feels like MaoMao suggesting that maybe the Dowager Empress hadn't thought about that safety net and how those people would be thrown out into the streets with nothing. So it's an interesting conversation. And I think that based on what we saw with the discussion of MaoMao and the Dowager Empress, I would love to see them talk about that. Because I think MaoMao has the perspective of growing up in the brothels and knowing how bad things can get, but also the freedom that, like, the three princesses, they're prisoners in a sense, but they also have some luxuries that other women aren't afforded in that society. So I think MaoMao comes at it from a very unique perspective that the Dowager Empress does not have. And the Dowager Empress's perspective is very much aligned from her own experience and her own imprisonment within the royal palace. So there are two women that know about the prisons that women face in this societal structure, but they come at it from very different viewpoints. And I just want to see them talk to one another about it. Like the scene where MaoMao and the Empress talk, I was like, I want more of that. I want more of that because I feel like that's so fascinating. But yeah, the brothel owner's like, officially slavery is banned, but in practice, everyone knows it still exists under a different name. And it's bad, but we've talked about it in season 1. It's like, yeah, the idea of prostitution is not ideal for anything. But for some of these women, the alternative is even worse. So it's like, in the words of MaoMao, pick your poison. And which poison can you stomach and survive longer from? So I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting. I'm so fascinated by this. I love their different viewpoints and I want more of it as we go throughout the series. And so then Shisui like tells MaoMao she needs to leave. And she's like, why are you out here? And she's like, does the Dowager Empress visiting have anything to do with the case the other day? There could be a big reform in the medical system in the rear palace. I feel like the Dowager Empress is on board with non-eunuchs practicing medicine because she's the one that banned eunuchs in the first place. So she has to know about the shortfalls and what's coming down the pipeway. And I feel like Jinshi and the Emperor are also on the same page. It's just finding a way to do it that the rest of the kingdom will be on board with and it won't seem too radical. So, because when you change things too quickly, sometimes people react very negatively to that because change is a big thing. So, even when it's done for good reasons. So, I'm curious to see what their practice is with that. I love Mao being like, well, I'd love to be in on that conversation, but I don't want to worry the other ladies in waiting and Hongniang any more than I already have. I like MaoMao is being considerate. She's like, you know, she can be a gremlin sometimes, but she also does take into consideration the views of the other women. And she's like, I don't want to make their lives too hard. Which is great. I've been causing a lot of upset lately. So yeah, everything gets cleaned up for the Dowager Empress to arrive. What's interesting is the Empress Dowager shows up and seems to like, she knows that Gyokyo is pregnant. And Gyokyo, like, her bust has filled out. She's like, you know, her bosom's filled out. She clearly looks like she's expecting. And her and Gyokyo seem to get along. They seem to get along, although Gyokyo knows her place. The moment that Empress Dowager was like, she just had to look at her and was like, get out. And Gyokyo was like, done. So for being it was very much a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, okay, you can leave now. Gotcha. And like went on her way. I was like, ooh. And she's so soft-spoken that you don't quite, it kind of throws you off when she says something and you're like, oh, you're really soft-spoken, but you're also really powerful. Okay. But it comes across in a much kinder way than I feel like the OG Empress was, right? She must be very trustworthy. I mean, I'm sure. Also, I'm like, is she drinking tea? Because she has like the ice cubes in it. It's not wine. And then she has the tea cakes. I do love seeing her with her granddaughter with Lingli. I keep wanting to call her Jingli. But with Lingli, I think that's super cute. But it's like they feel more like two friends a few years apart and not wife and mother-in-law. Well, yeah, true. So she says, you're the lady in waiting assigned here from Jinshi's palace. And then MaoMao's like, yes, I am. Okay, I want to do a really quick thing. Because MaoMao says she's like 30. There is no physical way for Anshi to be 30. There's no way. Because if we think about it, Jinshi is actually 19. He's legit 19. He's passing himself off as a 24-year-old, but he's actually 19. Pretty sure. If his dad was, let's just say on the off chance we'll lowball it. Let's say his dad was 17 when Jinshi was born. Let's just say he was 17. Let's do that, okay? If he was 17 when Jinshi was born, I mean, that's already 36 years old, right? That would mean that if, let's say, math is not my strong point, y'all. I'm an English major. Let's just lowball. Let's say, I don't want to say this number because it feels low, but I don't think I'm wrong. Let us say that Anshi was 12 when she had the Emperor. That's disgusting. I don't like that. But let's say that she was. But, oh shit. Oh wow, she could be 30. Oh my God, she could be 30. Oh my God, she could be 30. If she was 12 when she had the Emperor and he was 17 when he had Jinshi, oh my God, she would be 29 now. She could be 30. Ew! No! Gross! Oh no! Oh no. A 30-year-old grandmother? Oh my God, ew. I stand corrected. Welp. And even, well, I mean, yeah, let's say the Emperor was 18 when he had Jinshi. That's 30. Ew. I don't like that at all. I don't like that at all. But yeah, so it would mean that Gyokyo and her are just a couple years apart. I don't know. I've also jammed my finger, and so it feels not fun. And that's why I'm messing with it. Gross. Okay. So yeah. She's like, so Suiren told me a girl worth training had gone back to the rear palace. We find out that Suiren was her lady in waiting. Suiren was her lady in waiting and now is serving Jinshi. If I were MaoMao and I were putting two and two together intentionally, it would not be hard to question, like, oh, why is the Dowager Empress's lady in waiting now working for a eunuch and being Jinshi, who's all the time with the emperor? I mean, obviously the new lady in waiting is because she wanted Suiren to watch after Jinshi, who is her son / probable grandson. So it's like, okay, that all makes sense. But the thing about it is MaoMao is not intentionally trying to find all this out. MaoMao is intentionally shoving all of this obvious information to the back burner and being like, nope, I don't want to know. Not going to think about it. But if she thought about it for 2 seconds, I think she'd been like, this seems rather interesting. She used to be my lady in waiting. Okay, she used to be a lady in waiting, but not the head lady in waiting. Okay. That wily lady in waiting and her know each other. Well, you know. And then she looks over. She just looks at Gyokyo and like nods her head like, get out. And Gyokyo's like, oh, okay, sure. Like, I'll take my daughter and go. Ling Li can go. Can I put her to bed? And she's like, sure, go right ahead. She's like, well, she gets hints very quickly. Oh my God. Like, that was crazy. And then we see her in the shadows. She can take a hint. So her asking MaoMao to take a seat next to her looked so intimidating. I was like, whoa. But she has a reason. She wants MaoMao. Her son, the emperor, has told her all about MaoMao's amazing ability to solve mysteries and solve problems. And so she is asking MaoMao if she can help figure out, did she curse the former emperor? And, okay, so her lady in waiting stayed. And now MaoMao sells herself a little short here, and the lady in waiting kind of like gets a little bit frustrated, which we can understand because the lady in waiting for the Dowager Empress is probably thinking like, don't sell yourself short because it makes my empress look cheap asking you for help. And so, or it makes her look bad. And so MaoMao's like, oh, should I have been that negative about myself? Because MaoMao's just used to doing that. She's used to trying to sell herself as not being an important person so she can fly under the radar. But at this point, the Emperor and the Dowager Empress and Jinshi and everybody knows you're skilled. So you're not hiding anything. And they all know you're Locken's daughter. So you're not hiding anything. So it's like, you might as well just own up to it and don't try to be so modest. When she says, I don't have an incredible imagination or the deep knowledge that my dad has. I'm like, girl, you do have an imagination. And you always sell yourself short from Loman, but I think you're just as good as he is. She's like, I want to tell them beforehand. I don't want to sell myself as being this like savior when she's like, I may not be able to. I like doing that as well. And so I can understand where MaoMao's coming from because I don't want to frame myself as knowing how to do something and do it well and then it backfire and not turn out right. So I find myself guilty of that too sometimes where I'll be like, oh, well, I mean, I can kind of do that. And even if I know I'm okay at it or even good at it, I don't want to necessarily sell it as that because what if you mess up and then people are like, oh, well, you're not as good as you said you were. And it's like, So I can get where MaoMao's coming from. I totally get that. And then she's like, okay, I want you to look into something. Did I put a curse on the late emperor? And MaoMao's like, what? Excuse me? She's like, well, it might be natural to think of that way. So here we get to the part where everybody on Discord and Patreon and YouTube was like, the emperor's a terrible person. And I was like, well, if you'd let me wait one episode, I would have found that out. So basically, yeah, he doesn't have a good reputation. They call him foolish, an idiot, a puppet of the empress, which, I mean, we saw that last episode, and then there's the idea of him being a pedophile, which he took very young wives as part of political arrangements, but he intentionally sought out young girls, which is gross and disgusting. And the fact they say despite being surrounded by more age-appropriate women kind of seals the deal. Like, you had all the opportunities to marry someone your age, but you intentionally sought out underage girls. Yeah, not cool. Not cool. Now, here's the thing. The side of the woman with her hands over her stomach makes me think of the OP, where it shows then the man surrounded by the lotus blossoms. So I'm curious. And then we see the Empress. She gave birth to the current emperor when she was not yet mature, which, yeah. So they had to do a C-section on her. Okay. They had to cut up her belly to retrieve the baby. And that is where we see Loman. He was there too. The unfortunate doctor who had to become a eunuch to help with the surgery was Loman. So I guess he became a eunuch under the OG Empress to help her give birth, which honestly, that also, I'm like, MaoMao, girl, if he was responsible for her son being saved and saving her life in the process, because if she was 12 years old when she had him, then her body would have been in extreme danger from that pregnancy. And so Loman literally saving her life and her babies. I mean, I feel that MaoMao does not even realize how much this Dowager Empress is probably thankful for MaoMao being there, because she's like, your dad literally saved my life and my baby's life. So I'm like, MaoMao, I don't think you realize just how much, you know, good graces you could maybe afford from this woman. Because of those sacrifices, the current emperor grew up to be strong and healthy. And the Empress Dowager later gave birth to her second son, the imperial brother. Now, something was said here. If I remember correctly, the brother is 1 year older than me. Well, that's Jinshi, right? And then what'd she say there? The Empress Dowager must have been approaching 30 years old at that point. Oh, at that point. Okay. So we're going to go back. So at the time when she had Jinshi, she was about 30 years old. So let's back up. So 30 minus 19. Let me back up here. Y'all in the comments have probably already commented something, and now I'm making y'all backtrack. So that would have been one. Oh, at that point she was 30, but she'd had the emperor. So 18. You know, it's still 12. It's still 12. Oh my God. Okay. What am I doing with my life? Anyway. So by the time she had Jinshi, she was math. So she was probably about 30 whenever Jinshi was born. But that means, yeah, obviously no longer a little girl. Yeah. Which means, so now though, but now she is, but she's not 30 now. Right? Because that would, no, that's what I was trying to get at earlier. She was probably 30 when Jinshi was born, being a 30-year-old grandma, but she's not 30 now. That would make her, grab that. That would make her 49, right? That would make her 49 years old now. If Jinshi's 19, the emperor is like probably, oh my God, math. So if the emperor now is 36, which makes sense. If he's 36 now, Jinshi that makes her 49, which honestly, her being 49 and the emperor only 36, not cool. Not cool. But yeah, which means, is the imperial brother really the son of the previous emperor? That's the thing. Yeah, that's the question. Because she's like, if she was 30, the emperor would have been very, very old enough to die of natural causes. Is he really Jinshi's dad? Now, here's the thing, though. The thing is, he really the son of the previous emperor? Now, here's the thing. Because at the time, you know, she's like, if I said that out loud, I could be beheaded. I don't need to think about that. That gives another credence to why MaoMao doesn't talk about it, because she's like, if I say something that could be considered a traitorous response and treason, I could die. So that gives a lot of credence. My thing is, I do think, I mean, we know that the Empress Dowager was pregnant. She had a baby. We just think it was swapped with Aduo's baby. and that Jinshi is Aduo and the Emperor's son and not the Dowager Empress's. So the Dowager Empress, though, was pregnant, had a kid. The kid ended up dying later on, but then the question remains, was that kid the Emperor's, which I think it was. Was that kid the Emperor's? And then was that baby's constitution because being ill because of the honey that they were given, or was it something else? We don't know. We don't know because Loman wasn't around to deliver the baby, so we don't know. Or he was, and then they got swapped. Anyway, so they invite the 4 high-ranking concubines to a tea party. So Li Shu shows up with her folks. Li Hua shows up with her entourage. And then, Lolan shows up with her entourage. She's Shisui. I can't unsee it. She just looks too much like her. And so then they have I like that they have all the different fruits. They have peaches, they have grapes, they have pears. It reminds me of Li Hua. They have oranges, all of that business. And they show up with the tea party. And then they have Ling Li and all of that. Okay. Lady Gyokyo is getting sleepy, which is a sign of early pregnancy. And they're bringing out all the clothes and everything. What is the Empress Dowager thinking, meeting outside of the rear palace for tea? So it's the outside of the rear palace, but it's the inner court where the emperor lives. And they're like, well, she knows that the Lady Gyokyo is pregnant, so why now? But yeah, I like that they trust the Empress Dowager, thinking there's a reason behind it. Who knows what the other concubines will think. If her pregnancy is an open secret, then people will eventually find out. But Lady Li Hua doesn't want to risk people finding out about her pregnancy. So here's the thing. The Dowager Empress is like, well, Li Hua is not going to ask Gyokyo about her pregnancy because she doesn't want to be asked about her own. And she's not like that. That's not her demeanor, her attitude, especially now that Sheen is gone. So I don't think anything is going to come of that. The thing of it is, though, they talk about, they say that it would be bad for Lady Gyokyo to pick a fight with Lady Li Hua. They're the two ladies that are at this point in line for Empress. I mean, Li Hua has the more noble bloodline, but Gyokyo already has a child and, has the Emperor's favor. Li Shu could say something if her ladies in waiting asked her to, but they're not going to risk anything. There's been too much with Li Shu go on. They're probably not going to say anything because they don't want to get any more hot water, so that's probably not going to be a thing. Then there's Lolan. Lolan has the possibility of saying something. I mean, she could. She could say something. She doesn't have any rumors surrounding her, oddly enough. Also, the flowers coming out of her hair look like bug wings. They look like insect wings. And I'm like, that's just giving me Shisui vibes. I just think that it is. She has her flashy fashion and all of that. She just looks like Shisui, y'all. Yep. She could say something. I don't know if she will or not because I feel like she's working undercover. So I don't know. So then Hong Niang's like, I'm going to be the taster today, not you. That worries me a little bit. I don't want anything bad to happen to Hong Niang, but that worries me a little bit. She's like, I'm going to be the taster today. So what that means is that the Empress Dowager has set this up to have a separate taster. And so we have to trust her that she's doing that, this is all for the right reasons and we should trust in her, And regarding MaoMao specifically, the Empress Dowager wants to help her with this curse. So then MaoMao asks about that. I like that Hong Niang does the Kabadan on her and pushes her up against the wall. She's like, don't betray Lady Gyokyo. And MaoMao's like, yep. In that moment, I felt personally that Hong Niang was setting up the fact that I feel like Gyokyo could be the next Empress Dowager only because we had Suiren, who was the lady in waiting for the previous or the current Dowager Empress. And Hong Niang's attitude in that moment with MaoMao reminded me a lot of Suiren. And I was like, oh, I could see you being a great lady in waiting, head lady in waiting for the new Dowager Empress. I could see that. I could see that so much, right? I don't know how, with Gyokyo being so easily just told what to do by the current Dowager Empress, and it's a formality, so she really doesn't have a choice. But I don't know if I feel like Gyokyo, though, would be strong enough to have a voice to stand up to people and do what she needs to do as an empress. We know Lihua can. Lihua proved that last episode. We know that for a fact. So I'm curious to see. Gyokyo doesn't seem as proud and headstrong as Lihua, and that kind of that attitude. The Dowager Empress seems like this mixture between Gyokyo and Lihua. Like she is like soft and kind seeming like Gyokyo, but she has this air about her like I'm going to get what I want, kind of like Lihua. So very curious. But yeah, poor MaoMao. She's like, I'm not messing with Hongniang. She's like, I want to maintain a good relationship with you, MaoMao. Well, good. That MaoMao's like, I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear that indeed. Yeah. So the curse she mentioned, the one lady in waiting for the Dowager Empress talks about that. And they take her to, this used to serve the rear palace's function before the current rear palace was built. So they take her back to this place that's been kept clean, I think out of formality. And then when they get there and open up, the pebbles on the dry landscape of the garden are well laid out as well. So they open up, not even the cleaners are allowed to enter. Now I was getting to go to all the secret places no one gets to go to. So they open it up, and there's a paintbrush, and there's paints on the ground. Now, the paints are red, green, and blue, which are the same colors that were on the bouncy ball that Jinshi had. And what I theorized last week was that the bouncy ball was a way of distinguishing color blindness. So it, to me, seems like these colors are of the paints are differentiating and determining the color blindness of maybe the emperor or his sons, what have you. So that's interesting to me. And MaoMao immediately notices a smell. So what is this room? There's cups, there's paintbrushes, there's stuff laid out, there's like mold or something on the walls. Yeah, and the paintbrush, and then there's like a pebble. During the reign of our current emperor's grandfather, a court lady who became a low-ranking concubine lived here. So, yeah, what is this? The court lady who became a low-ranking concubine. Why? What was she doing here? Who was she? This was the room of the woman who was referred to as the Empress. And this is also where the late emperor was raised and where he passed away. Okay. I'm so curious, like, what the paints signify. Because we're meant to focus on the paints. And I'm like, is it turpentine? Is it formaldehyde? When they said the body was preserved, I was like, was it injected with formaldehyde? Is there an equivalent to that in China at the time to preserve it? That would be my guess, but I don't know how the formaldehyde would be explained. Unless formaldehyde has a terrible smell, a disgusting smell. We dissected cats in high school, and they were vacuum sealed in formaldehyde. It was disgusting. Probably horribly chemically dangerous, probably too. But, you know, back then. But anyway, the smell was just horrendous. So there's no way they could open up that coffin and not smell something. But I don't know, unless it was masked somehow or if it was injected. I don't know how that works. I'm not a mortician, but there could be something there. So then they open up one of the windows and says, during his final years, the late emperor and his mother, the so-called empress. I love that little shade there where the lady in waiting is like the so-called empress. The mother, though, let's be real, said they spent a lot of time in that room. Okay. As if clinging to their memories, they spent much time there. The late emperor, due to his weakened spirit, drew his last breath in that room. And shortly after the empress died, as if chasing him. So, I mean, if he wasn't young at the time when he died, the empress was probably even older. So it's not surprising she died right after him. But why is the curse there? Why would she think that? And I mean, I get that she wished for him to go away. I mean, if a man like that had impregnated me at 12 years old, yeah, I kind of would have not wanted him to live either. So I get it for sure. But why do we think that there's a curse at play? And then that's when we have the body. I like that there is her and the emperor at the same time. And it's like, ugh. Also, I noticed when they opened the casket and looked at the body of him dying, now clearly he died whenever Jinshi was a kid. So he died when the emperor was probably in his mid-20s, right? Probably around mid-20s. But clearly the emperor takes a little bit from the old emperor because his face looks more severe. I mean, good thing that Anshi and Aduo's genes are really good. But yeah, so his body was preserved, whereas the old Empress's was like decayed. Interesting. I don't know if there's something to do with the ceiling of the mausoleum and everything, but still, even then, I mean, you could line the coffin with things to keep bugs away. I mean, there are deterrents to bugs that you could do. And maybe that's what Shisui is doing. If Shisui / Lolan, who knows, are doing experiments, maybe they're seeing if there are different, natural things to keep, bugs from entering places. Like I know for ants, you can take coffee grounds, and ants hate the smell of coffee grounds. So you can like put that around and it'll deter the ants. They're like, they don't want anything to do with that. So it doesn't have to be chemical. You can find natural ways to deter bugs from spaces. So it could be that they had lined the coffin of the emperor with stuff that would deter bugs away. There could be like a natural formaldehyde or maybe some kind of chemical that they injected to keep the skin from decomposing and preserving it. There are ways that it could be done. The big question is, why would somebody do that? And why would they not do it to the old empress if they were doing it to the emperor? Like, what would be the point? Unless it was to, make the Dowager Empress, feel like she had been a curse. And so at the very end, MaoMao talks about, the fact that in the end, despite class systems, despite everything, the one thing that all humans have in common is they're going to die. That's like the one thing that makes everyone equals. It's the natural equalizer in the end. So yeah. Now, the big reason for getting MaoMao to try to solve this problem is they're about to tear down the building. And so we want you to investigate before that happens. And she's like, okay, I have one request. And then we don't find out what the request is. And I'm like, damn it. Wah! I feel like the request is to have Jinshi help, but I don't know if that is the case or not. If that's really what's happening. I don't know. I can't believe they're going to make us wait. Son of a bitch. I'm very curious. I'm curious why this building is being torn down when it was so impeccably kept clean for all this time. But if Jinshi is planning like a medical institute or a more fancy calligraphy school, I mean, I understand why they would want to get rid of it because of all the memories tied to it. And the Dowager Empress is like, this is all bad. I hate all the memories associated with this place. I can see why she would want to get rid of it. That being the case, though, I find it interesting that there are parts of the northern part of the rear palace that they've just let decay and kind of overgrow and just kind of become its own thing. But this place that holds so many negative memories was kept pristine, which again, you tie that to tradition and to, the royal family and the idea that some things that are stained with blood and horrible things are still kept in existence because of that propriety. I guess I can see why that would happen, but it's interesting. So we're on a timeline. We got to solve this mystery. The paints have something to do with it, but I'm curious what all we're doing. So, and what MaoMao's condition is. So much mystery. And then the whole thing with Shisui and Lolan, I've told people this every episode, but at this point, if we find out Shisui is just her own person, awesome. But until that becomes fact, I am not going to be convinced that she is not Lolan. They are the same person. They are either the same person or they are related, and it's like a thing with the envoy. I'm not going to be convinced otherwise until we are given proof. But that's my conjecture that I can't let go of. So anyway, in the meantime, I'm very excited to hear your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers. Please no hints or clues. I'll find out when the show tells me. But I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. I'm curious your thoughts down below. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of the Apothecary Diaries. Bye.